Chris, do you have a joke?
A joke, you ask?
Have you written it down?
No.
Right, okay.
It's up here.
All right, okay.
Cool. Because we did well on that list.
So listen, although we've seen the last coronavirus press conference down the road, it was the last one yesterday, wasn't it?
Daily one.
Daily one, that's what I mean. But, it doesn't disguise the fact that the authorities are still worried. There is a lot of jokes and laughter around coronavirus. They say it's a pandemic.
Oh, God, these are getting worse. Come on, Stuarty.
Oh, Jesus. Welcome to the Good Roundup. Good is a brand consultancy in the UK, and from time to time we get together and chat about brand and coronavirus and things that we like and things that we don't like. And with me as ever, I have Mr. Chris Lumsden and Ms. Julie Murdoch. So how are we doing? All right?
Yep.
Good.
What's up with you, Chris?
No, it's just I don't like the tone that you take with the jokes, but fine. I'll stop doing them then. Anyway.
Try and edit that out.
What are we talking about today?
Straight to business. Chris is in a big cream pop, so straight to business.
No pre-pod bands to do. We weren't appreciative of.
So today we're going to talk about something that we've been talking about for a while and battering about, and that is the concept of brand leadership. And
by our clients.
Well, just brand leadership. Well, I think the interesting thing about brand leadership is
of course within our clients.
It's going to be an abusive one. Hold on tight.
Sorry.
Scream if you want to go nastier. That'll be the thing we'll do. So we'll be talking about brand leadership, and the interesting thing about our clients, but the interesting thing about brand leadership, I think what's good about this kind of topic is that not just from an agency-client relationship, but if you're going to go to work for a company and you're going to work in the Marcoms department of such a company, you can actually then go, do these guys take this seriously, or are they at it, or is there a hill to climb? And it's one of these signs that you just kind of automatically assume. You kind of go, right, they do this, and it's worthwhile just kind of expanding in that. And that's what we're kind of meaning by brand leadership. And the first thing, the 5 signs of brand leadership that we think are important, starting with number 1. Can you guess what it is? It's pretty obvious, but that the CEO, or at least the board, take it seriously. That there is brand representation on the board. What do you think of that one?
I totally agree, but I think it's unlikely there'll be brand representation on the board. But I think that it's important that the leadership of the organisation are behind the initiative, or driving the initiative, and believe in the initiative, and prepared to fund the initiative, really, to ensure that it's done well. And we've seen this in many guises, involved in projects with big clients. In this case, the one I'm talking about is B2B, organization, and the CEO was the primary sponsor of the project. And funnily enough, it went really well because he drove it and expected his team to help facilitate the background work that we had to do, and it was really, really positive. It was a very positive experience, but it can go the other way as well when it's being pushed by, perhaps not at that horrible expression, the C-suite level, but, further down the chain. And if they're not behind it, it's hard. It's hard to get the dollars out of it, and it's hard to get the compliance, if you like.
And I think just this an extension of the same point, but I think if brand as a thing is seen by the wider organisation as being the remit of the pretty bit within the marketing function, then the opportunity to use that as a valuable tool to impact across the organisation is massively limited if it's not driven by the CEO and from the top down and across the entire organization so that brand as a thing encompasses everything from customer experience to product to innovation to HR to internal comms and marketing and marcoms and customer facing stuff, then it's, it is going to always be an uphill struggle because brand becomes the well-designed logo and a consistent color palette and, just words and paragraphs of copy on a page that live in a drawer, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it shows, I suppose, it's going to run a bit deeper than just that skin deep level.
But you won't find a board stroke C-suite in the world that will say that brand isn't important. I think they'll all say it's important, but how does that manifest?
You'll not get someone to say, yeah, brand's not important. But the extent to which they're prepared to fund it and walk the walk, as you say, is determinative around what's going to happen.
It's your point about did they take? Is it taken seriously? Is it something? How serious are you about it? And I think that is about, again, something that lives out with just the marketing function and the customer facing stuff. About how are you using brand to guide decisions about what you do and don't do as a business, as opposed to just how do we face out to customers.
And I think that probably leads nicely into the second point, was if you're taking brand seriously at that level, then you're going to need to do some research on it and some
measure
brand,
it.
and not just as sales volume or the kind of monetary metrics, but actually some brand tracking research.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Consumer research and tracking, and quite quickly you get to know how serious they are about that when you ask for some of that stuff and you see how recent it is
and how consistent it is.
Yeah.
And that's something we've talked to a number of clients, and actually more so recently in the B2B space, just by coincidence. But I think so. It's but again, customer research, looking at values and sort of brand perception metrics as a guide, and asking customers to. So there's the very any business will have a view on how they want to be perceived, but is that the reality in terms of how you face out to customers? And sometimes I guess it could be, same could be said internally from an employee point of view, but we'll come on to talk about that one, won't we?
Mm-hmm.
It's a consistent investment as well. So it can't just be it's not just a one-time thing. So whether it's NPS you use or whether it's a combination of NPS and brand tracking in its traditional sense, I think the challenge of expecting things to change quickly is something that we come across as well. And that, these metrics aren't going to change in 6 months on the back of one brand campaign or one piece of activity. These are things that you need to be measuring and monitoring and tracking over a 12-month, 2-year, 3-year, 5-year period to see a sizable change in terms of how those metrics are impacted.
And when you're looking at the brand tracking, just to be clear, you're looking at recall, which is, have you heard of these companies and you should be in there, and what do these companies make you feel? Or
so it's generally
perception?
a combination. Yeah, so it's a combination. So I was talking more there about perception, but yeah, I mean, page one is, do they know you? Do you, prompted and unprompted recall? So name all beer brands that you can think of, and then, show some logos of which of these do you recognise. So that'll give you your spontaneous or your prompted and unprompted recall gauge. But then it's, it could be, do you believe brand X is expensive, top quality, the best brand money can buy, believes in supporting its customers, whatever it may be. And then you have a kind of a set of measures that you can then track against on a consistent basis, which should be driven by your values. That brings you right back to, is this something that's driven from the CEO throughout the business? Do individuals across the business understand that fundamentally what your brand stands for, what you're built on, what you believe in? And that should really drive those perception metrics that you gauge.
I think as well, research is a double-edged sword for me. I think it's important that it's used in the right way, whether it's tracking or otherwise. And I think one of the signs that frustrates me, or it's quite a big tell, is if people use research blindly to help just to make decisions for them. One of my biggest bugbears is, organizations that overly test consumer concepts and, design concepts into the consumer space, because it's really, really tricky to do that well. And actually you're abdicating a bit of responsibility there. And to me, that's these are signs maybe that there's not an awful lot of experience in there, and that you're looking for research to lead that process. So it's not leadership; it's kind of the opposite. That's used as a crutch. So we have to be careful there. I think also there's the curse of over researching, and there are some consumer organizations, B2C organizations, that can get lost in that, and you can get lost in data, and you lose the thread of what the bigger picture is. So there's a couple of watch outs there for me. I think it's important, but it has a place, and it's important that the organization knows what the place is for research.
So that second part of understanding how your brand is perceived, which is externally by your customer, and as you say, Julie, the internal customer as well, is important. And that leads us nicely on to the third point,
it's
which
like
is...
we've rehearsed.
I know. I've done my homework. But the nice thing about the third one is once you get that information, what do you do with that? And that is the balance of what's called the long and the short, and how you can start to address some of the brand positioning work. Who wants to define for me the long and the short?
It's just the distinction between short-term sales activation based activity and longer term brand building activity, and understanding there's a lot of research being done in terms of how marketing budgets and should be split to support each. And I can't remember I can't remember specifically what it is. They're slightly different 60, for B2B 40, and 55, B2C, 40, something like that. But it's pretty much kind of 50-50. So half of your budget should be spent on the sales driving stuff, and half of it should be spent on the longer term brand building initiatives. And I think what we quite often see, particularly within the B2B space with some of our clients, is that the focus tends to be on the shorter term sales activation for a number of reasons. Yeah. I think, partly because some of those organizations tend to be very sort of historically product or engineering led firms. So naturally the focus when it comes to messaging and customer comms is much more on tactical sort of product specific features and benefits, rather than the sort of bottom of funnel type messaging, rather than talking to sort of end users about application, as opposed to the top of funnel. What do we want to be, and how do we want to talk about and position ourselves as a brand to people that are not necessarily ready to make a decision today about purchasing A, B, or C. But so we quite often tend to see more focus and investment on the shorter term activity than the longer term brand building. Or on the not necessarily on the flip side, the other thing we see is brands trying to do a combination of both. So having a product launch campaign, for example, but with a underlying brand message. So you're trying to do here's a great new product from X, and this is why you should believe it's great because we stand for ABC, which can be a really challenging thing to manage.
I think that's quite a common thing, isn't it, where marketeers want to try and force 2 or 3 messages into a push, and it's that sense of sacrifice that's really important. And we get it. We talked about it. I mean, it's difficult for B2B businesses to sacrifice and focus and do that, and focus entirely on a brand message rather than something with a call to action that might lead to a potential sale, because that's a difficult psychological barrier to cross, and you can get the sense that they're scared of just spending dollars in that space because the return is nebulous at best, and it's not felt for quite a long time. And given that, we were talking the other day about the average tenure of a CMO is
43 months or something.
So you understand why that the gravity pulls the activity towards tactical short-term spikes.
The other thing was, and I think just as an extension of that, I think there was, and this was from the point made in that LinkedIn report where we talked about the other day, and it was around this kind of belief, particularly within B2B, that buyers are making decisions on a purely kind of logical, rational basis. So the kind of need for that slightly more emotive brand building stuff isn't perceived to be there. And the research would say that although it's probably not as important as in the B2C space, a whole kind of mental availability thing of, how quickly one brand comes to mind over another, it is still important in B2B, but I think we tend to see probably less of an investment and a focus on that.
Yeah. I think this is the one in our list that is potentially the hardest to mitigate against us as the agency in that space. We struggle to, we can make the case for it, and we can, and there's lots of sort of empirical evidence to back those points up that you just made about, the benefit of doing it long term and investing through, downturns and that kind of thing. But it's really hard to to take it any further. And it comes back to the first point, I suppose, about leadership and the CEO and the level of engagement and appreciation.
Value, yeah.
Unless that link is made and is there, you're probably going to struggle.
I think that it's interesting when you look at media at the moment, and I've been watching a lot of the YouTubes, I love the YouTubes.
I hear that's good.
It's magic. You should really get it. The YouTubes, as my son calls it. I love the YouTubes. And what they're doing with pre-roll at the moment is they're 6 seconds. And we're talking to a client just now about doing a video, and they're doing that thing. They're talking about, we need brand, but we probably need, we want to do a brand message, but it really needs to have the product in it. And at the moment, there's Flash, which is a detergent brand in the UK, are now selling cleaners for your trainer, and they're getting the message over in 6 seconds. But what's happening is because you know Flash, because they've done years of brand building, half of the message is cut out because I trust them, because I don't really care about them, but I do trust that they do the job, which makes the selling of the new product a lot easier, and I trust it a little bit more because it's from Flash.
But the interesting part about that is, and I was talking about this, I was in a webinar thing yesterday. I was actually contributing in it, but the trust aspect. I know. The trust part is the interesting bit. The reason they can commute that to 6 seconds is because that's all inbuilt in your head already.
Yep.
If you are not Flash, and this is the brands that they conflate these things like, well, if Flash can do it, then we can do it. And it's like they forget the equity that's in your head that's been built up for years. There's a value to that. And it means that they can sell something in 6 seconds, where if it was a startup, you're probably going to have to spend a lot longer
you're going to
defining what that means, who you are.
Absolutely.
All of those elements.
And you're going to have to create a 30-second video, which does too much that you then don't care about, because actually, as with all advertising to a degree, it's getting in the way of the thing I want to see. So, and that's the curse of that's why the 6-second ads are so powerful, because if you have the brand position there, you can sell the product because you can't skip them. You can skip the 30-second ones.
Yeah.
And that's where so it's kind of going, they are two separate jobs. And I think sometimes B2B businesses look at that and going, we can't do that, but you can, because it's just a smaller audience. It's not mass market.
Yeah.
But
you can be really targeted with it, can't you? And you can, like we always talk about in the digital channels, you can measure it and evaluate it we'll test and learn approach very effectively.
It shows how important it is to position, and the foundational elements of your brand have to be absolutely solid first. Spend time and money and effort there, and then you'll get the benefit of that in the long term.
The one that we have referenced a number of times, and some of our clients are probably sick of hearing us talk about IBM as an example of a B2B brand that does that well in terms of balancing that really simple, engaging, slightly more emotion-led messaging at a brand level with the tactical product stuff. And that was there. You're not going to get fired for buying an IBM. And it's that kind of recognizing that business B2B buyers purchase for a whole range of, or make decisions on a whole range of factors, some of which are rational, but some of those, i.e., is this something that's going to get me fired? Emotional stuff is just as important.
Yeah, the emotion's really important, isn't it?
It's easy to forget that, I think, in the B2B space.
And a lot of the stuff that comes into us, one of the first things we'll do is help drive that sense of humanity and make them more human effectively. Humanize them, because they sound like robots in a way. And remember, the point is you can still be professional and sort of conversational at the same time. And that works.
And I think that's something we quite often, or we have seen a number of times in the past around, particularly from organizations that are very product technology or engineering led, because that kind of simplification of a lot of that brand language is perceived to be more like a dumbing down of how smart their tech is. And it's like, I think there needs to be an understanding at a product. And that's why brand is just as important, that brand lives within the product team as it does within the marketing function, because there needs to be an understanding that it has a role and it has a place, but understanding those hierarchies and how it all fits together.
It's the glue that holds all of those elements together. You want to move us on?
No, I don't know. It's probably another podcast that we can have about this, because it is interesting. It's about that humanization is understanding the emotional benefits, which is different from being emotional.
Yes,
and it is that kind of. And I read a very good article that was shared with me by my little crowd of people that I talked to on a Wednesday, and it was about that, saying it's not about being emotional; it's about selling the emotional benefits, and that's the key thing, and that's where it all ties in and builds up to making sure that there's two different messages. You can build up the emotional benefits of working with that company and the emotional benefits of that product. They are separate.
Yeah, and it's the fact that those guys, especially the product and the engineering led, they assume way too much knowledge at the start of that journey.
Well, that is a beautiful segue. Into my next
point 4.
Into point 4, which is
rather weirdly named.
Well, yeah, it was a thing that kind of I read and it made me think, and that is that brand strategy should always be an organization chart.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is, and this was actually originally presented to me in the sense of development within Apple. Believe it or not, I know I'm bringing up Apple, but a guy called Steven Sinofsky, who used to run Windows, was saying how amazing the work that Apple's doing. And what tends to happen, they've got 20,000 people probably working on this new transition that they're doing. And this is what tends to happen in organizations that size, is that the companies who, like at Microsoft, the team with the most amount of people could dictate strategy a little bit, have more power in changing, no, we can't do this. And I think what's interesting is that if working again with product-led companies, it can happen is that the product is more important than the brand.
Yeah.
Which is understandable because this is they've invested sweat, tears and blood into it.
And millions of dollars.
And
billions of dollars, yeah.
But if it then says, if you're then, the tail starts to wag the dog a little bit going, but we've done this because it's really clever, but it might not be necessarily what the brand value is or tie back into the brand. So actually, wherever possible, the brand should seamlessly interact with what the product's going to be. Like, it shouldn't, because it's started by a founder, and it should feel as if it's part of the brand rather than being forced into the other way.
Mm-hmm. And that's because I was actually reading an article. It was about
Was it a meme?
No, it was Rose Mercario. It wasn't a meme this time. But recently stepped down. Patagonia is one that we often talk about as well, but obviously that was articles where she had announced kind of stepping down and was talking about kind of over her 12 years there at Patagonia, that she developed a suite of initiatives across all business areas, but fundamentally it was about bringing their foundational commitment to the environment closer to its products. So it was about reviewing supply chains, it was streamlining production, eliminating waste and excess packaging, new technologies, investment in sustainable material science, all that kind of stuff. And it was obviously, I think she quadrupled the value of the business in the process, but it was all about building on the foundational beliefs and foundations of the brand about a commitment to the environment and protecting and not being a negative impact on the environment, but bringing all of their initiatives across the business to, closer to their product. So it wasn't, rather than living as something that was distinct from the apparel part of the business. So I thought it was interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think, it's probably at its clearest, that division between our, classically B2B focused organizations and the B2C ones. I mean, it's where the power resides. And you're right, the manufacturing function and to probably the same extent, the sales function can, and in some cases rightly, lead the whole shooting match, and brand and marketing is sandwiched in between as a delivery mechanism for the pictures.
And that's why we see that. That's why we see the lack of, or the sort of the kind of the lack of balance between the long and short investment, because sales targets and sales figures and quarterly targets set by leaders are so important. So tying that spend to leads and ops is a really difficult barrier.
And that's the relentless push on sort of shareholder value and price produces a cyclical short-term thinking scenario, which means that these longer term things are really, investment in them are hard. I mean, it's hard.
And that's where you see the big super companies tying it back to brand. I think it was Tim Cook who said, don't invest in us if you do not believe in our values.
In what we're doing,
then don't invest in us. It's the same with Jeff Bezos. You're not getting any money. Take a seat. You're not getting any money. Because our values are, we need to be better at this, and that's what we're going to do, because that's the brand.
And they're obviously two, iconic examples, but it is that leadership from the top that says this is and it's strategy, and it's all of these things, doesn't it? It ticks those boxes. But to these guys, they get it. They understand the value that brings. But that's not to say, And let's be honest here, that one of the questions we often ask is when we're brought in and we're given the chance to challenge that, what is the, what's the cost of doing nothing? Do you need to do this stuff? Mm-hmm. Because in some cases, sometimes it doesn't make an awful lot of sense to change it all up. And that system of a product-led strategy is sufficient.
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of times, very rarely, but the sales team say we need to change the brand, and that might not be the case. And again, this ties back up to doing research, because it's not a guy who's maybe not hitting the sales target can then start blaming, and it's the brand, people don't get it or anything else.
Well, it's an easy target. Yeah. It's an easy thing to change.
Yeah.
And that's when you can end up doing double damage, you know. And let's change things that have been around for a long time and have actually become strong assets, strong brand assets, but through a lack of understanding and a lack of research and a lack of knowledge around what the consumer and customer base actually believes, they go ahead and knee-jerk and change stuff because somebody doesn't like the colour of the typeface. Or these conversations are, again, signals to say these guys don't really have much experience in this space, and you need to be careful.
That's where your point about making sure that understanding the value and the place for research is important, because is something being changed because it's a customer need and it's going to improve the customer experience or make it easier to navigate, blah blah blah. Naming's one that we come up against a lot, isn't it? Or is it a kind of inside out decision that's being made because it makes sense for the business as opposed to it makes sense for the customer?
It's a good way of putting it, the inside out decision. And I like a client when you kind of go, when know that discovery phase, and you say to them, are you just bored of this? Mm-hmm. And you can usually tell by the amount of time between the question being asked and the question being answered. If it's 5 seconds, then you're bored of it and you haven't just realised it. And if they can kind of come up with a good solid answer, that's positive as well. And sometimes, the good clients kind of go, you know what, maybe. You go, okay, well, let's have a... And, we believe strongly in responsible design, not changing things just because...
For the sake of it.
Yeah, just because, these codes have been built up, all the logo, the strapline, everything has been built up over years. And as you say, Chris, you might be doing more damage.
I think, though, it's easy and we should acknowledge in the sake of balance, that it's easy to sit... And one of the benefits of us is that we're small and nimble. We can sit on the outside of those giant organizations and make them look stupid sometimes about some of the decisions and things they're doing. But, they are wrapped in politics and wrapped up in all sorts of, struggles that we don't really have the first idea about. And I think it's about trying to help them make the least bad decision. Sometimes we're often in that space.
And these things are more often than not are imperfect, aren't they?
Yeah.
We've kind of chastised ourselves for it a number of times in the past when we're looking at kind of brand architecture and naming and these beautifully crafted house of brand or branded house models that you kind of hero as this is what you should. And in the reality, businesses that grow through acquisition over a number of years, and I know this is a slightly different point, but your point about it's easy from the out to sit on the outside and make judgments about a situation. But decisions will have been made for the right reason at the time.
Look at the HBO stuff last week or the week before.
I believe the phrase goes that the road to hell
yes, sure,
is paved with good intentions. And, that's one of the first slides I put up in every presentation.
And that architecture stuff is one of the big blind spots, I think. The strategy around that is in B2B is really poorly understood and comprehended, I think. And quite often we end up having to try and unpick an absolute mess.
And lastly, but not necessarily leastly,
is that a word?
Is a word, or even importantly in this now, is that the brand is as important to the internal team as it is to customers, so that the brand is lived everywhere.
I think this is becoming more and more and more important with the workforce and society. Well, younger and I was listening to a guy yesterday who was talking from the BBC. He said work used to be a place you would come and you would leave your politics, your identity, any issues you have personally, otherwise at the door, and you'd go and you would do your work and you would come home. Now, people work for organisations that expect them to have a position on Brexit, Black Lives Matter, coronavirus, And they expect that to be stated explicitly and publicly. And I think that brands, some brands and businesses are getting caught in the hop here, and they need to be really clear and define what it is, and help reflect what it is that they're saying externally, and make sure that they're up to scratch internally as well. And the two, I think, historically, the internal brand, or sometimes the EVP or employer brand that we talk about, has sometimes been hived off, and it's been something that's been done by internal comms and HR, and they come up with something completely different that sits underneath in a weird way, but it's not really considered with the main brand, and it's a separate thing. And we've participated in that in the past, and knowing that it's wrong, it's really important, I think, now, particularly now, that the brand is really watertight to all audiences. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. I think, and one thing that we've talked about with, again, it was one of our tech clients specifically because of the war for talent, as they call it, in that space, and that as a recruitment tool, to be able to offer more than just an attractive package in terms of salary and healthcare, that they need to be able to be to represent themselves as a business to employees, obviously, but also potential employees as a place that they will choose to invest their career, really. And that that has to come from the core brand proposition. It can't be something that lives separately, or it's just a veneer.
For the companies that don't do long, when we're going back to the long and the short of it, that they don't do the long campaigns for their customers, you've got to do long campaigns for potential employees, because, as you say, Julie, the war for talent isn't necessarily just about what the health package is. It is about, is this a company that I can feel proud of working for, that I can say to my friends, I want to work here. It's interesting with Facebook at the moment with what they're going through. Would you want to work with Facebook? But there's a value. But one of the brand values in Facebook, to a degree, is that they are technically led and always pushing it. So for some people, that's enough. That's enough to actually, the work I'm doing can get seen by half the planet, and that is a value that I want to do. Other people go, no, they're dirty hate mongers, and I'm not going to go near them. And so it is interesting. Those values have got to be kind of put out there, and sometimes you don't have control of those values.
Yeah, and you have to live them. It's like, I say my kids, it's like, I'm not interested in what you're telling me about your homework and your schoolwork. I'm interested in what you do. So your actions are speaking a lot louder than your words, and that's some of the trouble that brands get caught in. That what they say and the virtue signaling and actually the reality, and they need to be really careful. I think over the last few months, some brands have been really quite naive and have been caught out, and the rush to say something to join the noise, to say, look at us. They forget to actually have a think about, well, what is it how is it we actually operate?
Yeah. And I don't think there's any shame in especially in these changing times, to say, you know what, we're going to take a week to work out what we're going to do. You know what, we're going to come back with a measured response as opposed to a knee-jerk one.
So I can't go out and say, we're here for you, and then deny all the loan applications.
Yeah, and then you're not going to get a ticket refund. I mean, that's what we can't do. So those are the 5 signs. So
summarize them, Stuart.
All right, then. Okay. Well, first of all, the people at the top
have to
brand,
buy in,
and it's not just we get brand because look at the beautiful yellow logo. That's not what it's about. It is about values, and it is about what the company believes in. Research on the brand to prove that what you think internally is actually being passed out there. So it's all very well saying, no, we believe in this, but do people actually know that?
That's what you believe in.
Yeah, and as Julie said, and also Julie, do they actually know who you are before they even get the values? That's a good point. Long and short activity, understanding that brand building takes a long time, but can actually help with that short-term sales activity by a shorthand of, this brand, and it is it's product X brought to you by company Y, and that helps a lot.
If you know who company Y is.
Exactly. The strategy for the brand isn't overly influenced by the products that you're releasing, but the brand is defining the products you're releasing rather than the engineering team or the product development team going, what would be good? A thing that goes boing at the end of your thing. And finally, the brand, it's about communicating the brand internally as well as externally, and making sure so that people know who they're working for and feeling proud for they're working for. And when these 5, and they're all connected, that's what's quite nice about them. There's a
There's
lot.
probably a lot more.
There's tons, but I think if you were kind of taking a snapshot, I think there's, and we could probably do
from our
another podcast.
perspective,
Yeah, I think a quick snapshot. We're going, and in a lot of ways, point number 5, does the brand work internally really does influence. Number 1, does the CEO get it?
Those two are intrinsically linked, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's not just being on board with the value of brand. It's actively driving it across the whole organisation. And I think that's that if you don't have point 1, there's not much point in talking about 2, 3, 4, or 5. I would say.
Yeah. It'd be the usual follow-on. So that has been
Very good.
brand leadership. My God, we're good when we rehearse, eh? So and just a quick thing about pubs. Jen won the pubs.
The open. Oh, Jen won the pubs.
Jen won the pub.
Jen won the pub
Good for Jen.
woman.
She gets a cheap drink from me in Avant-Garde.
£2 pint in Avant-Garde.
This has been good. Anything else?
Look forward to next week's.
Let's forward to next week. Let's do some more rehearsing. That'll be good. All right, everybody.